Immigration. Next theme, immigration and foreign affairs.
There are lots of issues with immigration that are linked to Donald Trump. It's hard to immigrate these days. I'd like to stay if I can find a good job. We have to deal with people who are arriving in droves because people are arriving and they don't have work. Should we let them in or not? Why not? Why not welcome them if we have the capacity? Do you think we should let in anyone who wants to come? In the United States, there's one rule. In Canada, there's another. I think everyone should follow the rule. We know there are over 500,000 Haitians currently living in the United States who are now being threatened with deportation. They might lose their temporary protection. I'll show you the numbers here. This is the number of people crossing the border in Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle. 1,411 people in the first half of April. That's more than in March, February, or January. So you can see the numbers are growing. Simple question. You have 35 seconds each. Would you accept these Haitians into Canada or not? Mr. Carney.
Well, first of all, this is a question of humanity. This is a human issue. And these are some of the most vulnerable people in North America. But there are limits. We have to be human, but we have to be realistic. Canada cannot accept everyone. And we have an agreement with the Americans, the Safe Third Country Agreement. And under that agreement, we will send back most asylum seekers.
So they would be mostly sent back to the U.S. Mr. Blanchet.
The rules aren't tributary to the origin of the requester. We can't say we'll welcome the Haitians, but tough luck to the Venezuelans. The rules need to be the same for everyone. I'm particularly sensitive to this because I often meet with Haitian representatives. They are francophones, and so it's easier for them to integrate into Quebec. If Quebec is able financially to welcome them, then I'm sympathetic. But the rules have to be applied, and Quebec's welcoming capacity is at its very limit.
The formal rule now would be to send them back because they are in a safe third country, i.e. the U.S. Mr. Singh.
In general, we should do our part. It's a question of humanity and compassion. We appreciate the fact that our country is founded on immigration. That is something important to us. We want immigration levels that are in line with our needs. But yes, we need to take in people, but if we cannot accept people, well, we don't want them to have a bad life here in Canada or in Quebec. So we need immigration, but we cannot take everyone.
Yes or no?
The specific question?
The question is,
do we accept those people?
For the people crossing the border at La Colle, would they be welcome to Canada or not? Because we have the right to send them back under the Safe Third Country Agreement.
Unfortunately, they have to be returned because immigration has to follow the normal entry points. Quebecers are extremely generous and welcoming. They welcomed my wife, as Mr. Blanchet mentioned, but the Liberal government has abused Quebecers' generosity with an out-of-control immigration system. The population has grown 3 times faster than the number of new homes built. This has created a housing crisis in Quebec. They're at the breaking point. And the government of Quebec has been given the power to choose immigrants. That was under the Mulroney government that power was delegated to Quebec. So we need to have realistic numbers, realistic based on our housing capacity.
Here. What Mr. Poilievre is saying is that immigrants should be blamed for something that is really the fault of successive Conservative and Liberal governments who have not invested enough in our resources, who have not built enough housing, who have not welcomed people in the way that they should have been welcomed. This cannot be blamed on immigrants.
All right.
That's not true.
Quebec is now asking given the number of asylum seekers in its territory, for $500 million. That was the amount they asked for in 2024. Mr. Poilievre, you'll be starting this open debate. Would you be sending a $500 million check to Quebec?
We have to work with the government of Quebec to fix the damage the Liberals caused with an out-of-control immigration system. And I also have to say that I reject the Century Initiative, which is a Liberal policy to balloon Canada's population to 100 million people. That's extreme. I think we should go back to immigration levels that are such that the population never grows faster than the number of houses, jobs, or healthcare services available.
Would you give more money to Quebec? And more generally, where would you like to have the immigration quota set?
Yes, we'll start with the second part. We need to have a cap on all types of immigration for a certain amount of time so that we can increase our capacity to welcome newcomers to Canada, including in housing, in training and language training here in Quebec, and make sure that the social safety net can accept them. And in those circumstances...
So, the targets announced by your predecessor, Mr. Trudeau, you would bring them down further, is that correct?
Well, there are some challenges here in Quebec, for example. Challenges with temporary foreign workers, for example. And it's a question of distribution, if I can say it that way. The distribution of workers across Quebec. And there's a shortage of workers. But we will maintain the cap on immigration for certainly a couple of years so that we can increase our ability to welcome newcomers.
Would you reduce the number of immigrants to Canada in general?
Instead of answering with a simple yes or no, I would want to base our response on the facts. It is obvious that we need immigration. When I speak to Quebec farmers, they tell me, yes, we need immigrants to work on our farms. When I talk to small and medium businesses, they tell me that we need immigrants. The question is, what level of immigration? We would base our immigration levels on the findings of an expert panel, which would study our capacities. Then we would have a data-based number. But I do not want to fall into the trap of fear-mongering or blaming immigrants for things. We need a facts-based, needs-based approach.
Temporary foreign workers are temporary. They're a different category. Foreign students are a separate category, and they are essential for our post-secondary establishments in Quebec and in Canada. Unfortunately, it's being used as a roundabout way to get asylum, and asylum is also taken advantage of through smuggling and organized crime. We don't want to import vulnerable workers because we simply need people. Asylum seekers should be people who are in distress that we need to welcome based on our welcoming capacity. We are not currently in Quebec able to welcome as many people that are arriving. Quebec needs to be able to establish what its targets are. And one clear element, the federal parliament, with a Bloc Québécois initiative, decided to force the federal government to consult provinces within 100 days to determine how many immigrants would be welcomed. No one can decide, apart from Quebec, how much Quebec can accept and welcome.
Another rare moment where I agree with Mr. Blanchet. Temporary foreign workers are often victims of power abuses. We would restrict the use of workers who are exploited by major corporations.
The Centre Initiative was 100 million immigrants in Canada before the end of the century. Dominic Barton, a parliamentary committee, said that they did not take into account the uniqueness of Quebec, and one of the two co-authors of the Centre Initiative and 100 million people is now one of Mr. Carney's close advisors.
Mr. Carney, on a different subject now, Would you say that the immigration system in Canada is going off the rails, or has gone off the rails in the last 7 or 8 years?
Yes. The system isn't working. And especially after the pandemic. Our population has gone up, I think, at about 3% per year because of immigration. And that's why we need to have a cap for a certain period of time. And I'd like to say that Canadians, Quebecers, and all Canadians, they want to welcome immigrants. There's no problem with Canadians' attitudes here at all. It's the responsibility of all of us to increase our capacity to welcome newcomers.
Is it normal? Now, in France, it takes 6 months. In Germany, 8 months. So, why do asylum seekers coming to Canada take at least 3 years to be processed?
Because Canada is obstinate in welcoming more people than they can process, house, and they're not taking into account the proportionality of every province and territory.
I spoke with federal public servants, and they told me that there is a lack of resources. There aren't enough workers to manage all the files that are coming in. It's unthinkable that people have to wait 3 years for an answer.
But is that not the big problem,
It's a huge
Mr. Poilievre?
problem. So we need to have more people working on this. People who can make decisions, or at the very least provide an answer, because it is entirely unacceptable that we have people waiting so long.
Mr. Poilievre, is this problem solvable?
Yes. Look, it's all about efficiency. By screening out bogus asylum seekers, that's what's slowing things down. We could reduce processing times by getting rid of the bogus claimants. And when people are forum shopping, when they've been to other places, that also slows things down and discourages genuine claimants. My point of view is that if someone's in danger in their country of origin, they should be able to decide to come to Canada. But if they're not refugees, for example, we've seen a situation in Mexico where people came here without ever needing to be refugees. They never needed asylum, and that causes a bottleneck in the system. And so what we're going to do is ensure that genuine refugees can come here and have their lives saved through the generosity of Canadians.
But how do you separate the real ones from the non-real ones?
Well, that's the problem. The machine, the apparatus is too cumbersome. And Mexico was one of the causes in the problem. So by eliminating that source, that helps alleviate the problem.
Is that an acceptable wait time in Canada?
No, it's not acceptable. It's inhumane. It's inhumane for asylum seekers. And that's an indication that there is a problem with productivity in that department. That takes resources, but it's also a question of productivity.
Why not hitting the brake pedal with kindness, of course? Why not slow things down until we have a good system and a good public service for immigration that can deal with files in a few months? The rhythm is far too quick, and so we can't succeed at this rate. People, for economic reasons or who are in distress for other reasons, come to Canada and they're lost because their files aren't being processed.
You can conclude, Mr. Carney.
I more or less agree with that, but we need to be, as you've said, we need to be neutral. We need to act in a neutral and fair way.
All right.
A fair way for all.
I want to save some time to talk about two other important files: international aid, Ukraine, and Gaza. I think we've understood your position on immigration. The question is simple. Should we cut international aid or not? I'll give you some figures here. $2.1 billion is being given to Ukraine currently. That's a large amount of money for Canada. Ethiopia also. Haiti. There's a long list of other countries that we could have put up on the board. Mr. Poilievre, you've said that we need to cut international aid. What would you cut? Ukraine, Ethiopia, Haiti?
No. I would start by cutting off China. The Liberal government gave $250 million to the Chinese Infrastructure Bank in order to build pipelines, highways, and other infrastructure to promote the expansion of Beijing's empire. I don't think that's a good use of taxpayer money. Also, we saw UNRWA, the organization in the Gaza Strip that took part, or whose employees took part in the attacks of September 7th. So I don't think we should be funding that type of activity either. The aid we give should be directly to people in need and not through bureaucracies, multinational bureaucracies and
Let's
terrorists.
Let's talk about Gaza. Currently, Doctors Without Borders, just today, said that the situation was worse than ever. So if you cut UNRWA, which might be an imperfect organization, but if you cut aid to them, how can Canada help Palestinians?
With not-for-profit groups, NGOs that will deliver the services directly to Gazans.
The only group
on the ground.
I'd like to
because it's a waste of money when that money that's not even getting to the people.
I will start by saying if there's anyone in an organization with a problem, then yes, that should be investigated. But what you said about UNRWA was disgusting. This is the only organization that is helping out people on the ground. And you painted the entire organization with the same brush, calling it a terrorist organization. That is unacceptable. That is hateful, and it is entirely inappropriate.
Mr. Carney, on this subject of Palestinians and international aid, would you continue to fund UNRWA?
Yes. We are in a situation where we need to have an immediate ceasefire. We need to have all the hostages returned, and we need to resume humanitarian aid to Gaza. And at this time, we have $100 million from the Government of Canada that is ready to be provided in humanitarian aid to Gaza with organizations that are working there. And that's key. And I agree with Mr. Singh. There are only a couple of groups that are working in Gaza right now.
Mr. Blanchet?
It's a very unique situation. In Canada and in Quebec, the Jewish community is victims of radical Islamists. Palestinians are currently victims of terrible violence from the Israeli regime. We have to help people in distress. There and elsewhere, it's the best way to have international aid that is not military. We need to allow people to live happily where they live. And Palestine will not become Mar-a-Lago for Americans that just want to chill on the coast. We have to see where the money goes. We have to see how much money is taken by Hamas. It's maybe less now, but it was huge in the past. A lot of money was taken from the Palestinians. We have to help Palestinians at the end of the day.
International aid. So the three of you on this side would continue. Mr. Poilievre, do you have an amount in your mind of how much you would cut in international aid?
We're going to target waste. In all programs, we will audit to identify examples like UNRWA when they used funds for Hamas. We're also going to find other examples of international waste because
Sorry.
The decision is to protect Canadian taxpayers. We all agree that there's a lot of suffering here in Canada, and Canadians can't afford to pay their bills. So we need to find some savings in order to reduce the cost of living here in Canada.
Mr. Roy, I would like to come back to...
And we need to look at all departments in order to find those savings and protect affordability
No amount.
in Canada.
The question of Gaza.
Mr. Singh, I'm sorry, everyone's had their piece to say.
The situation is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see innocent people being killed. Mr. Carney, why don't you call things as they are? This is a genocide. People in Israel do deserve peace and security, but people in Palestine do as well. What is going on right now is a genocide against people
Mr.
in
Carney,
Palestine.
you can conclude.
Why won't you admit it?
The situation in Gaza, in the Middle East, is horrible. But
It's a genocide.
But I never use that word in a political way to politicize the situation.
All right.
But it's a matter of facts.
That was Mr. Carney's response. I think we've understood your question, Mr. Singh.